Happy Thursday, everybody in IB Nation, and to Salty for popping in. You got your response. He wanted a response. He got a response. Along with Jesse Stiers, I'm Sean Stiers. Hope you are having a great day. I like this kind of background you're looking at, how it like focuses on you and the background is blurred a little bit.
Yeah,
I think this is a good look. This is a good look.
thanks. I knew I'm going with the MacBook. Got all of my audio and visual settings down. So I think we're ready to roll. I'm glad you like it though.
It's your microphone's chopping a little bit. I don't know if you could hear that. It's chopping at my end anyway.
No, I don't hear anything.
Talk to me.
Hello. How was your day today?
You don't hear that kind of chop
Nope.
when it comes across?
Here, let's see if this
Yeah,
helps.
it's doing it. It's doing it. I love how he thought he had his audio settings set. Now you're on mute. How about now? How's your day? We've got a lot of comments from Marcus Freeman coming up on today's show, and now can't hear anything from you. So, nope, your lips are moving, but there's no sound coming out. Are you on the MacBook?
I can't hear you.
You can't hear me at all? This is a great show so far. I thought Jesse's gone and he's going to be coming back in. So the technical difficulty. We've got some comments from Marcus Freeman that we've got coming up on today's show. We've got some we in, we out that we'll be doing later. And of course, we've got some rapid fire as well. Yeah, Josh said he could hear. Maybe this is it, Salty. He has an unruly tuft of hair at the apex of the scalp. Just calm it down quite a little bit. We'll see what happens when he comes back. So until he does come back, I'll just kind of get started with some of this Marcus Freeman stuff because we did get to speak with the head coach, the Fighting Irish, earlier. Oh, Jesse is back. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I think everything's taken care of.
Okay, stop touching that because that's where the noise, I think, is coming from. Maybe that's what it was. Don't touch that because I could just hear the clicking again. I don't know. We'll find out. Do you not have like a regular set of headphones that you can use?
Nope.
Okay. We had some people, I think it was in the mailbag show, and maybe even prior to that this week, asking about the scholarship situation with Tyler Buchner, because you'll probably remember, like last year, Jordan Faison, as a freshman, was obviously on scholarship with the lacrosse team. He was a walk-on to the football team, but as soon as Jordan Faison took a snap for the football team had to give him a scholarship. Well, there are two other lacrosse players who have played so far this year, both Tyler Buchner and Matt Jeffrey. Jeffrey, one of the top-rated lacrosse players in the nation, who's a freshman for the lacrosse team, but also a walk-on receiver like Tyler Buchner with the football team. So does that mean that Notre Dame also has to give those guys a scholarship? How does all this work?
It was different. Jordan was what you call a recruited walk-on. We brought him here on an official visit. It had something to do with when he signed his NLI for lacrosse, whereas Buchner is in a different situation. Obviously, he's not a freshman. And then Matt Jeffries is in a different situation where if he played, he wasn't going to be accounted for as a scholarship. So it just had to do with, was he recruited, was he not, and when they signed their NLI for lacrosse.
So I had no idea, Jesse, that there were so many stipulations on how this walk-on in football, playing for another sport works. But there you go. Tyler Buchner does not have to be put on football scholarship just because he was a holder and ran for 4 yards against Georgia Tech. Are you happy about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's nothing I really thought of, and I think that there's no reason to essentially burn a scholarship on someone like Tyler Buchner. It wasn't like Notre Dame football sought out for Tyler Buchner to be on the team. He kind of came to them and said, "Hey, is there a role that, I could fit best in on this team?" So, at the end of the day, I just don't think that Tyler Buchner is a dire, crucial need for this football team. It just so happens that he was a good fit. He had experience, he had familiarity, and so it's just kind of like, well, why not, right? Like he was still a good guy, and he still brings good leadership and that sort of stuff. So,
Yeah,
um,
absolutely. Absolutely. But I mean, the most important thing is that it just clarifies that whole situation because because Jordan Faison had visited Notre Dame, he came on a football visit and obviously he was a recruited walk-on, as Marcus Freeman said, and he was a freshman. Again, I didn't realize there were so many layers to this. Okay, this is what would sort of compel you to ultimately get a scholarship. So Jordan Faison had to be put on scholarship last year because he was a recruited walk-on scholarship in another sport. Tyler Buchner and Matt Jeffrey, not recruited walk-ons, but walk-ons playing another sport. So they do not have to be given football scholarships. Brent is very happy to see you, Jesse. And as it turns out, it is Cowboys 49ers weekend. We will be addressing that later in rapid fire. So Brent, hopefully you stick around so you can mix it up a little bit, because I know that Brent likes to stick it to Jesse anytime that he can when
so
the opportunity presents itself.
very true. I don't feel great about the Cowboys this weekend, but like you said, we'll get into that a little bit later. Just to kind of wrap it up about this, Buchner Faison situation in terms of walk on, I just think, Faison is a critical member of both teams. He's a guy who starts on lacrosse and football. I just think if Buchner was a starter for both, it would be a little bit different of a story. I think Faison is a different situation because of his skill at both sports, right? Like
Well,
if Tyler Buchner was a full-time starter somewhere, I think we would be having a different conversation. I think he would have to be on scholarship at that
exactly.
point.
Exactly. And I mean, obviously, his situation is so unique to have been a starting quarterback for Notre Dame, obviously on scholarship, then to transfer and to be on scholarship, started a game for Alabama last year, and then to leave Alabama, come back in January for the spring semester, begin playing lacrosse, and now back with football. I don't think you're going to find many trails that go in the direction that Tyler Buchner's trail has gone since his college career began. Obviously, he is someone who is contributing to the football team, made a contribution on the field last week. He's worn the smock on the sideline, doing the signaling in from the sideline. And by the way, that's something that I didn't get. That completely blew past me. I wrote that down and I forgot to ask about it. Is like, especially for road games, you're still seeing a lot of signaling in of, like from the sidelines as opposed to the helmet communication. Have you noticed that? I definitely noticed it in the Georgia Tech game last week.
Yeah, I've noticed it, and I actually listened to a podcast. It was like a week or so or two. It was Bussin' with the Boys with Taylor Llewellyn and Will Compton, and they had Connor Stallions on. And I wanted to just listen to that and kind of get a different perspective of Connor Stallions and not the Netflix documentary and what Connor
Because you
Stallions,
got nothing from the Netflix documentary. I mean, none of us got anything from Connor
right.
Stallion from that, right?
And so what I understood from the interview or that podcast that they did with him, Connor Stallions basically broke it down of, teams, now that there's in-helmet communications, teams still have to signal in if they're going to go hurry up offense or no huddle offense. So what that tells me is that Notre Dame and Mike Denbrock want to get into these no huddle situations where they keep the defense on the field. And I do think that Notre Dame's offense does operate sometimes better in that 2-minute drill, kind of no huddle, getting the ball down the field. So I think that's when you're going to see majority of the signaling is when they're going, no huddle, kind of tempo. I guess tempo is probably a better word for it, that was kind of created with Chip Kelly, right? The tempo and let's get downfield, let's kind of move the pace here a little bit, and that's what Notre Dame goes in and out of sometimes is tempo or non-tempo. But when they're in tempo, you have to have signalers, right? And so that's what Connor Stallions was saying is even though you have in-helmet communications, there's always going to be signalers to some degree at the college level because of the tempo. But you don't see that at the NFL. Every NFL teams they get in a huddle, right? Like it's an old school quarterback is in the huddle, they break the play and come out. You don't see that as much in college, and especially when you're going tempo. And just NFL doesn't.
Well, you can also, especially if you have a veteran quarterback who's been you're going to rely on them a little bit. You're going to lean on them and what he sees more than like in college. These are young guys who are still learning things. So a coach is always going to micromanage to a much larger extent in the college.
At the college level, they don't have the ability to audible at the line of scrimmage or check at the line of scrimmage just because of, like you said, they can't read defenses at that level. That's why it's professional football. They're professionals and they know how to read defenses to a different degree.
By the way, speaking of Netflix and documentaries, have you seen they just dropped a 2004 Boston Red Sox documentary?
No.
3-part. I watched part 1 last night. It basically went through the 2003 season, like acquiring Ortiz and acquiring Kevin Millar and, the Grady Little mistake in the Game 7 of the NLCS, leaving Pedro in there too long. Grady Little actually went on and, sat down for an interview for it. I was kind of impressed. But anyway, I would watch it if you like baseball, you like the Reds, even if you don't like the Red Sox. Part 1 was good, and I'm sure parts 2 and 3 will get even better as they kind of get into to all of the reliving of coming back against obviously, if you're a Yankees fan, you're probably not going to like it very much. How about some more Notre Dame football, though? Karson Hobbs, Max Hurleman, can they contribute anything in Notre Dame's secondary right now? This thin secondary, especially at cornerback.
Both of those guys are improving. Carson's doing a great job of just getting better week by week, practice by practice. Max has been more of a safety for us in the safety nickel position. But there's a chance you can see both of them in a defensive role this week. That's still to be determined based off the flow of the game. But I can't tell you what the outcome is going to be in terms of what's going to happen on Saturday. But I can tell you that both of those guys are ascending vertically, man, in a really good way. They're both improving tremendously.
I mean, and it's important, especially for Karson Hobbs, because as he was saying, Hobbs is going to be a cornerback, whereas Hurleman is kind of some depth safety nickel. Maybe like that nickel piece comes into play if Jordan Clark has to play outside more, those kind of things, depending on where they're moving guys around. What did you make of you could see him depending on flow of the game? Do you think he's just talking about simply if the score dictates, if Notre Dame is in that kind of situation, that's when you might see him?
No, I think what he's saying is if they need better tackling out of the corners in the secondary. Honestly, I think if they have to shuffle guys around, what I took it as is if Jordan Clark has to kind of switch to be out of the nickel this game and be more of a guy who they can trust on the perimeter in terms of tackling and stopping Navy's triple option, I think you could see one of those guys kind of step up and be one of the nickel guys, potentially later in the game as Navy might have to air it out a little bit, because hopefully that they're down, a few scores in the fourth quarter, right? So I think that's more or less when you would see one of them is kind of filling in because Jordan Clark's role has switched.
I don't know. It's interesting that you say that Navy has a triple option, Jesse, because everyone's yelling at us that they don't run triple option anymore.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't pick up on that piece. They definitely still run the triple option, and even if they're in shotgun,
that's what's crazy
it's
is
still
everyone's
a triple option.
Right, and that's what Vince and I were saying yesterday. Even when they're in shotgun, like they're running option plays off a shotgun. It might not look like traditional triple option, but there are still option concepts that they're running, whether they're in shotgun or under center.
I mean, I've made this argument a bunch of times. RPO is just another version of a
still
triple option. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's all that Navy's doing is just running it out of gun. And they're not even really, I wouldn't even call it RPO because out of the gun, you're going to know right away whether or not it's run or pass. It's just run option out of the gun most of the time. It's not really a pass option. So, I still think that they are 100%. I mean, like you said, they only, average 15 passes a game. And the majority of those other run plays are still what I would classify triple option, whether or not it's in the gun or not.
Yeah, Mike was obviously watching some of that Red Sox documentary. He said Grady was no fan of management at the time. That much was clear watching John Henry say, can we fire him now or after the game was worth the watch alone. He was sitting there and he made that comment, apparently sitting in the owner's box at Yankee Stadium. But yeah, that was good. Like they do run, whether you want to call it jet sweep or what, like some of that, they'll put the receiver in motion out of the gun, but again, I think you diagrammed some of that the other day where, the quarterback in the shotgun, will fake either give the ball to that receiver coming around, coming through in front of him, or one of the slot backs going, whichever way. He'll either give it or take it and then, have a look at a pass. Those are three options that he has on any given play. Brandon, an Adams grad, class of 2008. You were what? You were 2013? Is
14.
That right? I always forget which, I always I have to sit back through and think through. That's right. Your junior year was 2014. So 6 years behind Brandon in here.
Always nice to have some fellow intelligent Adams graduates.
Yes. So some interesting stuff, though. Red Zone came up with Marcus Freeman today. Both of these teams are really good on both sides of the ball in the red zone, both in, scoring in the red zone and red zone defense as well. Navy's offense is tied for first in the nation, red zone scoring opportunity. Now, this is percentage, what your red zone percentage is. Notre Dame is number 34. Notre Dame's offense, number 34. Navy defense, number 4 in the red zone. Notre Dame's defense, number 17 in the red zone. So here's Marcus Freeman kind of on what all this potentially means.
Yeah, especially defensively, we have to find a way to get red zone stops versus team. They're obviously good on both sides of the ball. Offensively is having a great plan and making sure we finish with touchdowns and not field goals. But defensively, I think you make sure you have a great red zone plan. They're really good on offense all over the field, but in the red zone. So there has been a huge point of emphasis on the defense side of the ball, and offensively just continuing to have a great plan and executing at a high level.
I don't know about you, Jess, but especially when you're on defense, when you're Notre Dame and Navy's offense is the number 1 scoring offense in the nation. By the way, tied with Kansas, Ohio State, Troy, and Louisiana Monroe. Again, this is percentage. Navy is 23 of 23, 18 rushing touchdowns, 4 touchdown passes, 1 field goal when their offense gets in the red zone. And again, you've got 18 rushing touchdowns and you are an option-based team. It ain't just because you're in the shotgun all the time. It's because of what you can do. To me, I mean, the best way to counter that is just keep them out of the red zone, because it's typically, like that Navy offense, if they're matriculating that thing downfield, it's like they're, like a drive kind of gets into a flow. Once they get to the red zone, they're going to have a lot of, they have a lot of success when it comes to scoring. The best defense against that to me is just keep them out of the red zone. What do you think?
Yeah, there's a reason why both of these teams are so excellent offensively in the red zone. It's because they have a common denominator, a quarterback that can score touchdowns in the red zone. Both their quarterbacks have 10 rushing touchdowns.
Yep.
And I think it also combines with the fact that both teams are really good at running the ball. Most of the time when you get down to the red zone, turnovers happen because of interceptions. You don't really see fumbles a whole lot. So teams that take care of the ball, run the ball well, and have really good, running quarterbacks, I think all of those kind of give you a good recipe for teams that are going to be good in the red zone, teams that have good offensive lines. And yeah, if you want to limit, something like that, I think you have to, keep teams out of the red zone. But I would say one of the strengths of this Notre Dame defense is even when teams do get in the red zone, they're very good about holding teams to field goals. And I think that's ultimately what's going to have to be done to beat Navy this week. You can't keep letting Navy, one, score a lot, or two, score touchdowns when they get in the red zone, right? Like, it's a triple option offense that's going to wear you down. It's meant to wear you down, but you just can't break. You have to hold in the red zone and find ways to hold them to field goals.
And I mean, you did the whiteboard a couple of days ago. You've drawn it up. You've watched. We've all kind of watched it. What's your confidence in Notre Dame's ability just to match up man for man against, that Navy offense? What's your confidence in Notre Dame's defense going into this game?
I'd give my confidence a solid 8.5 out of 10. I feel really good about the interior defensive linemen between Mills, Cross, and Rubio to take away that dive. I feel really good about Notre Dame's linebackers to kind of fill the alleys, on the edge and be able to clean up some plays. And I feel really good about Adon Schuler, Xavier Watts, and probably some Kennedy Urlacher coming down and, filling the lanes on the pitch, man. The only thing I'm worried about defensively for Notre Dame are their edge players. And are they able to set the edge and, essentially kind of take away that QB option of the triple option? I think that, that's going to be the biggest thing or the biggest challenge for the Notre Dame defense skill-wise is their edge guys. And are they able to, they're the read guys, right, on the triple option, right? So this isn't a task that is hard for just Notre Dame alone. Like, that's what the basis of the triple option is, revolves around, is reading the end man on the line of scrimmage. So that's the position I'm most worried about and why I'm at 8.5.
The end is the position that you're most worried about?
Yeah, just because of, injuries, depth, kind of lack of experience. I don't think Burnham or, Bryce Young have started against the triple option look. I think Junior Tuihalamaka is a little bit he's not rangy enough at times. So I just worry about, what they're going to be able to accomplish with those edge defenders. But everything else should be fine. The interior should be fine for fullback dive. The edge should be good, in terms of the pitch man, and maybe if the quarterback breaks a run between the linebackers and the safeties.
Indy Sailor says he's having trouble with his feed buffering tonight. Could be your internet. I'll tell you this. I was watching my Sunday Ticket, which of course is the streaming package on YouTube, a couple of weeks ago, and I was trying to watch the Ravens, and who are the Ravens? I can't even remember, but it was like a horrible picture, and it was just ticking me off. And so finally, I just went to my internet router and rebooted it. It came back, and the picture was crystal clear. So, Indy Sailor, I'd hate to lose you for 5 minutes, but that might be what you need to do, is just reboot your internet router and see if
it's funny. Yesterday, I was at work, and I was having this really annoying issue with this computer program that I run. And I asked this guy next to me, I was like, hey, you work with this stuff a lot. Like, why is my computer messing up? He's like, well, have you just tried, rebooting it? And I was like, no, I haven't. And of course, reboot should be the number one thing that you should try.
Well, working at a radio station with my old friend Bob Henning, who's the engineer at the two different radio groups that I work for here in town, his first response whenever you were having any technical issues, unplug it, wait 10 seconds, plug it back in. And 9 times out of 10, that usually solved the issue. So it's something as simple as that. Brent Smith, how many snaps did Rubio play against Georgia Tech? He played 17 against Georgia Tech, played 21 the week before that in his first game back against Stanford. So a total of 38 snaps. And I would think this just feels to me like a Gabe Rubio kind of game, like
under 19.5 snaps this game.
I'm going to go over. I think he's going to have at least 20 snaps in this. I think the only thing that keeps him away from that is the possibility, just like limited plays, because the clock keeps moving so much. Now there will be some more incompletions than we're used to in a Navy game
I
because
think
they're
that, and
passing.
if Navy gets in a groove, they don't really allow you to rotate. They're going to keep you on the field. So that's the only thing. Like if they got deep into like a triple option drive.
That's right. As Rapid Nile Chihuahua says, IB Nation Sports, Red Sox, NFL, Notre Dame football, and tech support. And of course, don't forget Dallas Cowboys as well. I'm sure that most people would just as soon forget. And Jeff, he says he sees no we in, we out. Did you get tired of our stupid questions? Absolutely not. We've got we in, we out coming up in a little bit. It's in the show description. I just didn't put it in the title because there was like too much to put in the title for tonight since we had a little bit of everything today. But yes, we've got we in, we out coming up in a little bit. We've got a few more comments from Marcus Freeman before we get there, though. I don't know if you've noticed this, but Notre Dame has dominated in the second and third quarters this season.
I contributed to hopefully a mindset, the ability to stay in the moment, the ability to understand that this possession on offense or defense is the most important possession of the game. This play is the most important play of the game. And then as you look back at the game, it might be that, hey, we've been playing well in the second quarter, the third quarter. Let's figure out why we didn't start the game off the right way. What plays, what execution did we lack? But again, it's just if we can focus on every possession, every play, we'll look back and you're going to be able to have some of those summaries of how we played in the game. But it isn't like we have a speech or something that happens before the second quarter. I do think it's a testament to the in-game adjustments on all three phases, but both sides of the ball, offensively and defensively. Like that, probably more than anything, is a credit to that. The ability to say, okay, hey, here's what they're doing to us, here's how they're attacking us, and here's how we want to, return the attack and make sure we find a way to have better success.
Now, I've talked before, Notre Dame's defense has only given up like 6 points a game in the second half, like 6.5 points in the second half. Second and third quarters, though, Notre Dame has a 76-16 advantage in the second quarter this season, 59-7 in the third quarter. So those two quarters, the two middle quarters combined, 135-23. What do you make of that?
I make that Marcus Freeman's response at the beginning was kind of lame and boring.
And then he kind of gave some details.
Yeah,
he kind of word saladed through the first part of it.
Yeah, and then he finally kind of got into the specifics of it. I just think that Notre Dame is a really good about, kind of just tweaking their overall game plan a little bit based on, what the other team has given them. And I think when you're Notre Dame, and you're consistently a top 25, top 15, top 10 team, every single year, teams kind of have one thing that they've been doing on tape. And I think that they know who they're playing and the opportunity that's ahead of them. And they kind of come out with some wrinkles, a little bit early on against Notre Dame. And I think that kind of stifles them a little bit, but you can't do that the entire game. And I think Notre Dame finds a way to settle in both offensively and defensively and take what the other team is giving them and just kind of going about its business. So, I mean, it makes sense because those, like most teams have their most success early on against Notre Dame because of what I was just talking about. Maybe stuff that you didn't game plan for, maybe that they haven't shown on film quite yet. And you're like, okay, well, now that we've seen it, you go to the sideline, you get a whiteboard and you just kind of draw it up what you're seeing. And then you find a way to make an adjustment. So I think Notre Dame is really good about making adjustments in the end.
They absolutely are. And the question is, will this be a fifth consecutive game where they fall behind early and then go from there? Because it is 4 straight games as of right now. They obviously started very slow in the first quarter last week, but there are also limited possessions last week. They only had 4 regular possessions, not including end of half, in the first half. I mean, it was literally like a Navy game. Typically, the possessions are so limited. This just feels like if there's a game that you can't afford that, it's this one and Army because of the way they run their offenses, don't you think?
I mean, you cannot allow Navy and Army to kind of take control of the game and dictate your fate at the end of the day. You have to get on top of these teams, make them uncomfortable, and make them try to catch up to you, because that allows them to get out of their triple option. The more you get ahead, the more they have to abandon the triple option.
So Emma asking a recruiting question. I apologize, Emma, but that's not our alley. So if you want to ask that about Madden Ferramo, I would jump on with Brian and Trevor on the Mailbag Show tomorrow afternoon. That would be the place to do that. I apologize. I'm not. Maybe I need to start having Nick, our new recruiting guy, on this show every once in a while, like we used to do with Ryan. Maybe we'll see about bringing Nick in. Maybe that'll be an off-season thing. I don't know. I'll have to talk to Brian and Nick about that.
Emma Eckstein, what a name! If that is like that is old school, like Freudism type name. I don't know if you've ever dabbled in some Freudism.
I've never done. It's been a long time since any Freud, but no.
I just, when I see a name like that, I'm like, is it a coincidence, or is that like your code name? You know what I mean? Like, if you, some of
like
these
the
other,
you mean, is that what you're saying? Or
and I always, have you ever thought about, like, if you were a celebrity, what your like alias would be? Like, if you had to go to like a hotel or like a
checking in.
Like what name you would use, so everyone's not freaking out that you're like Dak Prescott or someone.
I haven't. I've never given that much thought. I mean, I go on the road quite a bit. I'm not a celebrity. You know, I'm not like Olivia Miles or Hannah Hidalgo or, you know, any of them. So that's exactly right, Salty. I'm not a licensed recruiting commenter. Emma says her parents didn't know the whole Freud thing, though.
All right. Coincidental. Thank you for clearing that up.
By the way, have you ever noticed Marcus Freeman taking notes during games on the sideline?
Yes, sometimes I'm like, what the hell are you writing down right now?
Yes, and I think a lot of people have wondered.
Very quick notes, though. It's like boop, 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 and he's done. It's not like he's sitting there writing forever. It's like very quick notes.
All right, Brent's coming back for rapid fire. All right. Be here.
My son, actually, funny. My son asked me the same thing this week. There's a couple of different things that I have a routine of doing in terms of, certain things that happen during a drive, and then certain reminders that I want to make sure that I remember as we go into the end of a half or the end of a game. And so those are different things that I do. There's also different notes and reminders I have for myself on there that I have to go back and look at and make sure that it's almost like my game plan. And so if you saw it, you probably wouldn't understand. There's a lot of writing on there, but there's different things after each series, maybe a penalty after each situation that happens that I jot down on certain sides of the page, and it's, again, for a couple of different reasons, to remind me of certain things, but also to keep track of certain things.
I remember when I was coaching baseball, I would have a notepad in my back pocket, and I keep my little pencil in or my pen, up in my hat, and most of my notes were about Jesse running through stop signs on the base paths, like.
But I mean,
Jesse
you have to
ran through another stop sign.
You have to follow it up with that and say what the end result was. Majority of the time, I was safe.
I will admit the head coach sometimes was playing it conservatively, but I was typically following the don't make the first or third out at third base rule. But the base runner got a little bit more daring. And I don't think you got necessarily got thrown out, but
that's what I mean. And so
still running through the stop sign.
When you listen to a lot of MLB third base coaches and like Joe Girardi they talk about how they don't necessarily tell their players when to go or stop, because the runner knows how to feel the situation and read kind of what's going on around them. I just had ultimate confidence in myself that I was going to, beat the throw out.
Yes.
But I think Marcus Freeman's response couldn't have been more vague either, because it's like, well, of course you're writing reminders and like notes down for yourself, but like what specifically are those reminders? What specifically are those notes that you're seeing, right? Because it's like, well, yeah, if like there's something that you saw that you want to continue to emphasize through the game, then yeah, you're going to write that down. And I'm sure there's certain times where he just writes down, Q4 and however much time is on the clock, so you can go back and remember to look at whatever happened in that
on the
moment.
film. Yeah, exactly. Just like little, again, like he doesn't want to sit there and write a novel while he's trying to coach a game, because the next play is happening pretty fast. So it's all, as he said, probably just a lot of chicken scratch. And then it's like you have to go back and you're trying to decipher exactly what it was that you were even saying. But like you said, wasn't overly specific. But I think part of the question was, you don't have to be too specific, but what kind of stuff are you writing down there? So
can you go ahead and bring up that last Brandon Roos comment? It was like 5 comments ago. It has to do with Gabriel Rubio potentially at the Zero Tech.
This one? What do you think about that?
So, it says, Notre Dame moved crosser G Rubio to the Zero Tech for the Navy game to stop the dive. I think that's a concept that I brought up on Tuesday's show, as I wouldn't be surprised if Notre Dame gets into maybe a bear front at some point, and you have Rubio, Mills, and Cross all on the field at the same time to really kind of hammer away or take away that dive. And then my other bold prediction for the game is I still think that KVA is going to find himself as the end man on the line of scrimmage at some point, and kind of relieve either Bryce Young or Josh Burnham as well. So I think Gabriel Rubio and KVA will have a big impact on this game. And kind of going further, I think that Notre Dame will get into maybe a bear look and use all 3 of those guys. And KVA will be a nice kind of athletic end, essentially, right? A guy that's not going to beat you to the sideline, and KVA is going to be able to force things to the sideline. So
yeah, I brought that up with Vince yesterday. I don't think Vince is agreeing with you. So I'll be curious to see how it turns out. If you called that, or, Vince was typical grumpy Vince yesterday. We kind of mixed it up a little bit in rapid fire, talking about some of these conference scenarios and Notre Dame's playoff chances and stuff like that. Because Vince is rose-colored glasses Vince, and he always thinks everything is going to break exactly in Notre Dame's favor all the time. And while we may want that to happen, that doesn't mean it's going to happen. And that was
if we pulled up, Vince's track record of
so now I'm praying that it goes right. I need to write down that video and come back and find it potentially. I don't know. There's a lot to play out.
You need to get your Marcus Freeman on and have your notebook for the show. Yeah, write down what show it was, what minute marker it was, and right. Whatever dumb thing Vince decided he wanted to say next.
Well, there are a lot of people who want us to put timestamps in the podcast and stuff like that so they can forward specifically to those. But that's where you have a paid producer that would come in handy to do that kind of stuff. Salty wants to know what difference it makes which base you make the third out, because the result is always the same. Well, part of the thinking, don't make the third out at third base, is, okay, so if you're trying to get to third base, you could still just stop at second base and be in scoring position, because if there is a hit or, the ball is put in play and there's an error because you're at second base, because there are 2 outs, you're going to be running all the way no matter what. So most likely you're going to score. So that's why you don't typically risk making the third out at third base.
Yeah, and the same goes for making the first out at third base. So the assumption is, why have nobody on and 1 out when you can have, a guy on second and nobody out, and you would hope that in 3 outs that you can make your way from second to home.
Yeah. I remember,
but if you're me, I just go to third and say, screw it all.
Yeah. I remember one of your teammates at the end of a game, we won't name any names.
I remember where this is going.
He was the tying run with 2 outs in the last inning, and I told him to stay close. He ended up getting picked off between second and third to end the game. That was a lot of fun.
Oh, I don't remember that one. I remember in our sectional game when someone blew out their leg going around third.
Oh, yes, there was that one as well.
And then
allegedly, but then he was walking fine the next day after all this.
Well, and the part that I'll just leave it at this. I get if you get hurt, but the ultimate competitor, knowing the situation, I would have been crawling.
You got to get up. You got to get up. we
You
were
gotta
about
do
to tie that
something to-
game. We were about to tie that game against
Well, and
that
that was the
freaking school
playoffs,
out there in
too.
Grant. Yeah, you're right. You're exactly right.
So you just got to find a way sometimes.
I mean, that's the basis of life right there, Jess. You just got to find a way, right? Like that's it.
Pain is temporary.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. All right. You want to do some we in, we out now?
I think we got to get into we in, we out so we don't have a marathon-esque show because we got a lot in rapid fire.
We do. We got a lot of rapid fire. We got some good we in, we out questions coming up here. So we're going to do it all. First one is from Hesburg Mafia. Let me see. I gotta get on. What just happened? My screen just scattershotted on me. Will either Jaden Greathouse or Bo Collins have a 100-yard receiving day before the end of the season? In or out?
I'm going to say in, and I would go with Bo Collins.
I think Collins is the most likely candidate as well, just because he sees so much volume. And like we're back to this again. It was a whole thing throughout all of last year, and then it finally took Jordan Faison until the bowl game to get it done. I'm in, and I agree. I think it'll be Collins as well. Against Florida State, Notre Dame will rush for over 200 yards, but have no 100-yard rushers. In or out?
I'm going to say out. And there's a question that pertains to that in rapid fire, but I think Notre Dame is going to start having some more of those Century-esque runners.
Oh, so you think some individuals are going to start to emerge here and have some of these big games?
I do. I think some of these guys are queuing up for takeoff.
I'm going to go in on this. Notre Dame will rush for over 200, but have no 100-yard rushers, because the way it's split up right now with Riley Leonard, Jeremiah Love, and Jadarian Price, it's the 100-yard games are becoming fewer and far between in terms of the runners. Limited carries have kind of put the kibosh on that. And then last one from Hesburg Mafia. Yankees beat the Dodgers in 6 for the first World Series win in over 10 years, 2009 to be exact. It's been 15 years. In or out on that, Jess?
I'll say out. I think it's going to 7, but I do think the Yankees are going to, and I think starting pitching goes to the Yankees. I think hitting is pretty equal across the board, and I think the Yankees have a better bullpen. So I think overall the Yankees pitching is, I think, what's going to kind of differentiate them. The Dodgers are just horrible right now in terms of starting pitching. It is like a battle of nutrition at this point. Everyone's hurt. They don't have.
It's a battle of nutrition, so they're counting calories over there in LA, like they're on the Miami Beach diet or what?
No, I couldn't think of the right word, so I just had to let it rip.
Oh, you made it happen. ND Guru. Drake Bowen will have. Oh, by the way, I am out on that because I think the Dodgers are going to win. If it ends in 6, it's going to be the Dodgers. So you might doubt the Dodgers pitching. I mean, here they are. I think that they've had the tougher road to get to the World Series than the Yankees.
Oh, for sure.
I don't think the Yankees have been tested at all. So in spite of whatever pitching deficiencies the Dodgers have, they have come through it with flying colors so far. So I've got the Dodgers winning this thing. In or out, Drake Bowen will have 12 plus tackles with 3 tackles for loss against the Mids.
I'm going to say out. Okay, I'll go in on 12 plus tackles. I'll say out on 3 tackles for loss. It's really hard to get them for tackles for loss just because of how much they are moving downhill towards the line of scrimmage. The only way you get them is on a pitch play between the quarterback and the pitch man. And if they can blow that play up, that's where you're going to get your tackles for loss. But I just don't see Drake making 3 of those kind of plays by himself.
Yeah, I agree. I've got to be out just because those are pretty lofty numbers. I think he's going to have a good game, but that's a little bit high end. I think the leading tackler last year was 8 tackles. And again, don't forget, there are more passes, so the ball is going to be kind of out in space a little bit more. So I've got to be out.
There are no Jesse Stiers out there averaging about 20 apiece against the triple option.
That's it. The defense will force 3 turnovers, 2 fumbles, and 1 interception. In or out on that?
I'm out on that. I think Navy is really good about protecting the ball. I think it's going to be a big point of emphasis, especially against an opponent like Notre Dame. You can't give Notre Dame extra opportunities, and you can't, take away points off the board for your own sake. So I see maybe 2, potentially more than likely. I think the number is 1, and I'd be really happy with 1.
They don't turn the ball over. They have not lost a fumble this season. So
Yeah.
I've got to be out. I think if Notre Dame can get 2, they'll be in really good shape. I think it's going to be tough, though. I do think that this quarterback can be forced into making some mistakes throwing the ball that he hasn't made so far this season. He is not a precision, not a really accurate thrower of the football. Like he'll throw that thing up for grabs. And I've talked about how so many of the passes that you see him completing are to one of those slot backs who are wide open because they just kind of get lost and someone misses an assignment. But I do also think that, with kind of some of these deep fades and that kind of stuff that he throws, that allows Notre Dame's secondary, which is going to be the fastest that they face this year, more closing speed opportunities to make some plays.
So the thing that I'm most curious about is this guy hasn't been forced into pressure. And I think that he's going to face pressure from Notre Dame's secondary, from the defensive line, from the linebackers. So what I'm looking for is can he use that pressure and make diamonds, or is it going to be him essentially crumbling? Because I just don't think anyone's really applied that kind of pressure yet. I think Navy's had a little bit of a coast going on these first 6 games.
I think so too. Again, Notre Dame, 10th ranked defense in the nation. They haven't faced anything like that so far. Final one, Notre Dame men's basketball makes the NCAA tournament. In or out on that?
I'll go in on that. I like what I saw last season, and I like what they've done in terms of recruiting, going forward. So I'm going to say that they'll be one of those bubble teams, but I think they'll sneak their way in.
I think they're going to be right there as well. I think we saw really good progress at the end of last season, and they've got a good core coming back. Obviously, you get Marcus Burton back and all those young guys. Last year was a big learning curve, but I think they'll find themselves in the mix at the end of the season. A lot of good things trending in the right direction. Domer Grizz, Riley Mills should have been playing as well in the first 4 games as he has in the last 3. We in or we out on that?
I think that's a really hard question to kind of answer. I think that you can still be effective outside of the snaps. And maybe we don't know what Riley Mills had going on those first couple of games. Maybe he had something aching that, people weren't really kind of talking about or disclosing, right? But I do think that he has played better as of recently. But it's hard to say because he was a really good player last year, right? And so it's like I don't know how you could drop off all of a sudden. So I just think that it might have come down to just not being as prominent in the box score, but still having an impact on the game.
Yeah, I mean, he is definitely producing more. Like even if you look at his PFF grades, his last 2 games, he has graded out the highest. He got an 81.9 overall defensive grade last week after a 74 against Stanford the week before that, and again, like if you look at early in the season compared to where he is now, their grades basically line up with what we've seen from Riley Mills in his play the last couple of games. So, I mean, I think we all would have liked to have seen a lot more from him, but again, it's weird how this really it was around this middle of the season last year where it felt like he started to kick his game up a notch or 2. So, hey, take what you can get. Don't complain that he's playing really well right now. That's what they need. And in this game and against Army, it's going to be really important. Come on, scroll. Here we go. Okay, Mr. Gilmore with a bevy of questions that he came with. He had part 1 and part 2 in a couple of different posts that he had. So, number 1, Marcus Freeman's handling of the offensive coordinator position has been very good considering the high turnover in his first 3 seasons. Look at Brent Venables and Oklahoma and compare. I'll go ahead and read. He says, part 2, Freeman was smart to go with a veteran portal quarterback, especially since he was bringing in a new OC. Sometimes going young at quarterback with a first-year OC can lead to disaster. See Oklahoma again. So, are you in or out on those?
I am out on the first one. I don't think he handled it very well. I think his first season with Tommy Rees, it was just kind of the cards that he was dealt. I don't think he was really going to come in and make all these, like splashing changes. And I think that the team wanted some sort of, a team doesn't like, in terms of like when Brian Kelly left, they don't want to just see everyone else kind of fly out of the room too, right? So I think keeping Tommy Rees around provided some sort of stability. And I think that Tommy Rees is a really good offensive coordinator too. So, that was kind of, it is what it is. I didn't agree with Jared Parker year 2, but I don't know how much that was forced on him because obviously he wanted Andy Ludwig.
He wanted Ludwig. Yeah.
Right. And so that's you would have to go talk to Jack Schwarbrick about year 2 and ultimately, what was kind of decided there. And so if that was the case, I do think he handled Jared Parker really well. And then obviously year 3, he hit it out of the park by getting, probably the most, a top 5 college OC that there was. So I do think he's done a great job, but I do think that, at times, especially last season, he could have been a little bit better.
Look, I think that ultimately, I think he's handled it the best that he could because of, as when he was hired, it was an arranged marriage with him and Tommy Rees. And obviously Tommy took off after the first year. He handled the when Tommy Rees did leave as best that he could. It ended up Jared Parker got a head coaching job. I am a little bit shocked. I don't know if you've seen, but Troy has only 1 win right now with Jared Parker down there. Maybe some people aren't shocked, even though, they did score a lot of points. And then he made a huge splash when he was able to get Mike Denbrock. And the most important thing now is Mike Denbrock has talked about wanting to be here, wanting to stay here long term. And I think that ultimately having that continuity going forward is what's going to be the most important. When you have 3 when you're a defensive head coach and you've got 3 offensive coordinators in 3 years, that is not an enviable situation. And like Vince and I were talking yesterday about Jaden Thomas's comments about he's also had 3 position coaches since he's been here, like 3 wide receivers coaches. So think about that. There's been, and you've had a couple of offensive line coaches already as well. So there's been a lot of turnover so far. So I do think he's handled it the best he could. In terms of the veteran portal quarterback, I still think that it made a lot of sense. No one saw Northern Illinois coming, but at the end of the day, I think for what this program needs, I think everyone wants to see them start to obviously develop their own quarterbacks through recruiting. And I think we're finally going to kind of see that starting with next year.
So what I would say about that is when you're Marcus Freeman and you are a first-time head coach and you're at the University of Notre Dame, the expectations from this fan base is to win. And I don't think there was time for, Notre Dame isn't a program where you can take a year off and develop a quarterback, I guess is what I'm saying. You are expected to win now, and you're expected, quite honestly, to win every game. I mean, the expectation is to win every game, go to a playoff, and have a shot at the national championship. I don't think you can do that when you have to take a year off and develop a quarterback. There's no, again, the fans aren't going to be happy with a 7-5, 8-4 season because you decided to take a year off and develop a quarterback. You have to get someone that can come in now and win. And I don't think it's fair to the rest of the team either, especially when you have a defense playing at the caliber that Notre Dame does. It's a disservice to them to not have someone in there that's going to give you the best shot at winning.
Jeff slid one in. He missed the thread on the Champions Lounge. We in or we out? If Notre Dame wins out and gets in the playoffs, they'll host a first-round game. Most projections have them on the road. So are you in or out on that, Jess?
So what that would mean with a 12-team format and 4 teams getting a bye, or is it 5 teams get a bye? 4 teams get a bye, 5 teams.
Four teams get a bye.
So
Four
the
teams get a
remaining
bye. Four teams get a bye. 5 through 8 get to
8.
host. 9 through 12 play on the road.
So Notre Dame would have to be a top 8 seed by the time it's all said and done in order to play a home game.
Right.
I'm going to be quite honest with you. I think if Notre Dame wins out, they'll be lucky to be in the top 8. I think they'll be like a 10 through 7 type territory, just based off of, I know the committee is different from the AP poll, but I just don't think Notre Dame is going to get a lot of love with one loss and it being to NIU. So I think they're going to be, best case scenario, a 7 through 10 team. So I really give it a 50-50 chance of them hosting a game, if, assuming they win out.
No, I mean, I'm in the same boat, and that's where Vince and I were kind of butting heads because, like, if you look at these other conferences, there are, can upsets happen? Yes, but things have been very chalky so far basically in the Big Ten, in the ACC, and the Big 12, and there are just going to be so many chances, like, to have all of these, like a cluster of one-loss teams from all of those conferences that's going to make it really hard for Notre Dame to be seated much higher than 8th or 9th. I think 8 is probably their max.
Yeah.
As of right now, just because there are going to be so many other teams in the same boat, and then you're splitting hairs and comparing resumes. So I've got to be out on them hosting. I think. Now, if you do get a few upsets, that's obviously going to help Notre Dame. But I just think it's going to be really hard for them to be able to host at this point, just based on the way things are trending right now.
I mean, we all know that the SEC will get favoritism. I just think that there's going to be, outside of the top 4 conference winners, I think an at-large Big Ten team, an at-large SEC team gets ahead of Notre Dame. So that's already 6 spots accounted for. So that just leaves, 7 and 8 really kind of 2 at-large bids for Notre Dame to get. So like I said, I think it's a 50-50 shot. They definitely have a chance, but they need as many teams to lose as possible and Texas A&M to win as many games as possible.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to get the first rankings coming out here in a couple of weeks. So I see like Jeremy and Tommy talking about the committee loves them. I mean, that'll give us a much better feel for what Notre Dame's chances are, because it is just human polls that we're going off right now. And there does tend to be some differences, and sometimes major differences, between human polls and the college football playoff poll based on what that committee does. But, again, Notre Dame has a bad loss. There's no way around that. And the biggest thing they have to hang their hat on right now is Texas A&M. And Texas A&M has to keep winning. And again, as like Notre Dame fans want Texas A&M to keep winning. Are they going to keep winning? They've got LSU this week. They've got Texas at the end of the season. Those are going to be, the big 2 for them. And in that case, even Notre Dame is competing against Texas A&M. So where the committee puts them,
That just led me to my next little fun question for you. If Texas A&M beats LSU this week, what are the odds Texas A&M jumps Notre Dame, even though Notre Dame has beaten Texas A&M?
There's a good chance that they might, because again, I just feel like if Notre Dame beats these service academies, even though they're ranked right now, especially depending on what the score looks like, what the game looks like, all those different things, I don't know that I'm not sure that Notre Dame is going to get a lot of credit for that. That they'll still be looked at as, you beat a service academy, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, a team is good until Notre Dame beats them, is what it comes down to.
And that's typically how it usually goes, right? By the way, Tommy's got something for you here. Say the word swear.
Swear.
Now say swore.
Swore.
Now say swarbrick.
Swarbrick.
There you go.
He gets on me every time.
Not related to Kyle Schwarber in any shape or fashion. Giving Chris Mitchell and Jaden Harrison a ton of snaps at this point doesn't make much sense, Andrew Gilmore says. They aren't overly productive. Go young and develop KK Smith and Micah Gilbert. He thinks they can match the current production. Are you in or out on that?
to be out on that. I still think there is something to be said about experience and kind of big game moments, right? And still the ability to block on the perimeter and do your job in the run game. I think that's still an important part of this. And again, it's not just all about physical talent at some point. It's still kind of being at the right place at the right time. And that's what Mitchell and Harrison have proven to do at past schools and at Notre Dame. And we all know that Marcus Freeman's a big guy of who they can trust on the film or on the field, right? And so I think right now there's just more trust in those older guys, and especially as you're going down, in the or in the back half of this season, all of these games are more important. And especially considering, everyone's talking about making the playoffs. Well, you got to win these games. There's no room for error. So I don't think there's any time to kind of mess around with, developing some young wide receivers.
Yeah, I mean, Mitchell doesn't have a ton, 11 catches for 115 yards, but he's still their third leading receiver right now. I mean, he had one catch last week. He had 4 catches, a couple of weeks ago against Stanford. And remember, I'm not saying, that KK Smith is going to drop every ball, but he had a drop when he had an opportunity a couple of weeks ago. So, a lot of this still has to do with, the quarterback and the system and just everything else. So I don't think you just throw a couple freshmen out there, because they've shown that this coaching staff has shown that they will play freshmen. They'll play freshmen if they think that they should be out there. So KK is obviously a redshirt freshman because of his injury last year, but that's just I don't think that that's the route that you go. I think that you still play the guys who you think give you the best chance, and Chris Mitchell has been productive when the ball has come his way. The ball just doesn't go his way very often. I think there might be one on him coming up here in a little bit, if I remember right. Now, another one from Andrew. Chad Bowden's recruiting at wide receiver has simply not been good enough. It was the most glaring hole on the roster when he took over the recruiting operation in 22. If he does not sign a major wide receiver class in 26, Notre Dame should consider replacing him. Sounds drastic, but you can't win a championship with a lackluster wide receiver room. Look, there are a lot of different reasons for this. And again, I don't follow recruiting closely enough to know every reason. But again, when you look at what's going on the defensive side of the ball right now with all these young stud, talented guys out there producing, Chad Bowden is also a part of that. So it's not like you can just completely disregard that because the wide receiver recruiting isn't exactly where you need it to be. So I've got to be out on this because Chad Bowden has done far more good than any negative, at any deficit recruiting at one position.
I mean, this is just a one position group thing. The rest of the, roster is in good hands. I mean, look at the running backs: Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price, and Aeneas Williams. Like, those are all guys that Chad Bowden had a hand in, right? And I think the offensive line, while it's young, is going to get there. They have good tight ends. They have good linebackers. They have a good secondary. So, does it stink? Yeah, and I understand the frustrations and kind of venting it out here about the lack of production at wide receiver, but I think that'll naturally kind of take care of itself as, Mike Denbrock and his offense continue to, elevate at Notre Dame.
Correct. DJ, Notre Dame, or Navy tight ends rather, average 14 yards per reception. That does not happen Saturday. We in or we out on that?
So I hate the double negative there. Does not happen Saturday. So what are we actually?
It doesn't happen on Saturdays. I think he just accidentally put a doesn't in there.
I'm going to say
he accidentally put the double negative, I should say.
I'll go out on that. I think the guys you got to worry about, and this is the main thing you brought up, are those, those wing backs or those H-backs coming out of the backfield. But I think that Notre Dame will do fine. And honestly, too, some of those running backs that are going to kind of run some wheel concepts out of the backfield as well. I think that's more so who you have to be worried about.
Yeah, I mean, the two slot backs, the guys on the wings, are Navy's top two receivers. And yeah, they, the the tight ends do have a good yards per catch average. Notre Dame has done actually a really good job when you sit back and think about it. They've done a good job of, like tight ends have not made a big impact on opposing, for opponents in terms of the receiving game this season. So I don't see that, I think the only way that it ends up kind of being in that ballpark is if you have one or two catches and one of them goes for like 15 or 20 yards and, skews the average up. But, again, like their yards per catch is there, but the volume is not there. They don't catch a lot of passes. Navy doesn't, like Cody Howard, 3 catches, Jake Norris, 2 catches, Thomas Scully, 1 catch, Miles Slade, 1 catch. So I'm not concerned about that. Tommy coming in hot, writing a book on this one here.
Man.
So he says, let's talk about the future of college football. College football will inevitably break away from the NCAA. When that takes place, are we in or we out on each of the following administrative structures? Number 1, a czar/dictator, complete and total power over college football, a singular person to love or hate as necessary. The person would have a staff of advisors or not up to that person. Contract is for 10 years per term, cannot serve for more than 1 term. So it's essentially like you get your Roger Goodell kind of thing in that you've got a commissioner.
I'll be out.
Number 2, hold on. Let me get through all these and then we'll come back. We'll see which one you like the best. Number 2, representative monarchy, the king or queen with a parliament of 1 person per conference. Monarch gets 1 to 3 votes, dictates/vetoes per season. All other changes must be approved by Parliament. Monarch serves for 5 years, not more than 2 consecutive terms. Parliament members serve for 4 years, not more than 2 terms. After the first monarch, every new monarch, I love this monarchy thing, selected from and by the Parliament. And number 3, president and Congress, elected by the schools. Each school gets 1 member in Congress as well as each conference. The president serves 4-year terms. However, if incumbent loses, she cannot run again for 10 years. President can propose rule changes and get 1 executive order per year. Veto power can be overruled by 3/4 vote. Congress votes purely based on majority rule, with the exception of the overruling of veto. Congress members serve for 6-year, 9 consecutive terms. So again, that is a lot. What do you think, Jess?
I haven't taken a government class. Being a sophomore in high school, so we're going on probably 13 years now of not taking any government classes. But let me. I can't say I absorbed all of that, first of all. So
there's a lot. Like the 2 and 3 there with all the kings and queens and monarchs and all that other stuff. That was like the representative monarchy, the king or queen, and the president. I could get along with
1 having basically a college football commissioner. I could see that. I could potentially be on board with that. So I will give that a in. Sure.
I would go with the first one as well. Essentially, if you had a commissioner of college football, yeah, I would be in on that. But you would have to make sure that it's, because like the way college football is obviously set up right now, there's so much conference control, and you would almost have to bring someone in, I think, from the NFL or like outside of college football to run this, because you just don't want any connections, especially to the SEC in the Big Ten. You don't want anyone, to have the feeling that there's a pull towards them, because they already have so much power in college football right now.
Yes. Number 2. I do like that one though as well. That having kind of like a monarch per conference, but we won't divulge too much time.
Okay. Joe Allen with a much more simple one. In or out, Alabama and Mississippi State should not be ranked in the top 25, considering all of the other teams that are ranked have 1 or less losses. Mississippi State's not ranked. I think he's thinking Ole Miss.
Yeah. Listen, all I got to say about that is who they've kind of lost to, and I think that Alabama comparatively has a little bit more difficult of a schedule. And what's also on Alabama's resume is they did beat Georgia, who is now again a like top 2, top 3 team, I think, in this new poll. So I do think that that'll naturally kind of take care of itself. But I think what they're weighing on that one is they have a top tier quality win compared to, and that kind of negates one of those losses, essentially, is how I would take it.
Yeah, I mean, Alabama obviously started off higher ranked. They did drop 8 spots after losing last week. So, I mean, yeah, I've got to be out just because I don't think you're going to fall completely out of the poll because you lost a couple of games. And like you said, I mean, the argument that people were making yesterday when Vince and I were having that debate was, well, Notre Dame still has a quality win over Texas A&M, and Alabama, their quality win over Georgia trumps that even. So even though they have a couple of losses, I wouldn't drop them out. Yeah, I mean, look, Vandy's ranked, though, this week, Joe. I mean, I know Vandy was not ranked at the time, but, I mean, it's a major upset. But I wouldn't drop them completely. Notre Dame didn't get dropped out of the polls because they lost to Northern Illinois. So, does Vandy's loss get erased by beating number 1 Bama? Which loss? Vandy's got 2 losses right now. Vandy's lost to Georgia State and to Missouri, interestingly enough. But I don't know. Okay, so ND Blitz. Okay, so I asked this in buy, sell, hold. Don't think it was answered. Penn State, Indiana, and Oregon will end up undefeated in the regular season. I'm out simply because hold it. I think I looked at this wrong. I thought he had Ohio State on there. Let me double check this here real quick. Yep. Penn State plays Ohio State. So I am out. I do think Ohio State is going to win that game. Indiana, even though I keep picking against them, like the big question is, can they keep winning without their quarterback? But they've also got to play Ohio State. And I can see them winning every game but Ohio State. So I'm out. How about you?
I'm out on this. I think Penn State ends up with 1 loss. I think Indiana ends up with 2 losses. And I think Oregon ends up going undefeated. But I just think Indiana's quarterback is going to be out the next 2 weeks because of this thumb surgery. I think that they lose this week to Washington, and I think that they lose to Ohio State even when he's back. And I, like you said, I think Penn State loses to Ohio State. And Oregon's schedule is relatively easy to kind of finish. They have Illinois, Michigan, Maryland, Wisconsin, and Washington. I think Illinois and Washington are the tougher ones. But yeah, I like Oregon's hardest part of their schedule is over, I think.
Yeah. And I think it's Illinois this weekend, right? Like you clear that.
Yeah.
And they should be pretty good the rest of the way. It ain't rocket science, says Bama's broken right now. It's so confusing how they can be so Jekyll and Hyde this season. I think that, there's a couple of different things. One, Nick Saban got out talking about, NIL and the transfer portal and all those things. And I do think that those things were factors. But I also think that, as he weighed the headache of those things against the roster that he has, I don't think that his roster, it wasn't as good last year. He did one of his best coaching jobs just to get them into the playoff last year. Remember, they started 3 different quarterbacks early in the season, and they ended up in the college football playoff. So I think all of those things. And then they're hearing some former players that I've heard interviews with and stuff like that, like the analysts, who have been down there and seen the way Nick Saban did things, with his very, controlling, very exacting style, coaching style that he had. And Kalen DeBoer is a lot more laid back. And now there can be something to be said for being laid back. But also when you go from a guy like Nick Saban, who had been there with the style that he had to, to laid back, you can see where there would be some impact. So I think that those things have had a big impact. I said all along, you're not just going to keep winning games because you're Alabama. Even if Kalen DeBoer can be a great coach, but you're not just going to keep winning because you're Alabama, because all these other programs have caught up too. And again, before Nick Saban showed up at Alabama, look at the up and down that came before him and all the head coaches they went through before they got to him. There were a lot of other good head coaches who were there who didn't do much winning when they got to Alabama. So I don't think Alabama is just going to keep winning because they're Alabama, regardless of who the coach is. Kalen DeBoer is going to have to go out and hit it big with his own recruiting now that he's there.
I think Nick Saban is a smart man, and he knew when to get out. And things were easy for Alabama because of the empire Saban built in terms of basically securing and stashing all of the high-end recruits. But now with NIL and the transfer portal, if you're a 5-star sitting behind a 5-star, you're going to transfer, go get your money and play somewhere else, right? So Nick Saban had a luxury. It got taken away from him. And now I think that Alabama empire is starting to fall. And I think, like you said, you're not just going to win anymore because you're Alabama. And I think Nick Saban got out. He jumped ship at the right time. And I think Kalen DeBoer is kind of left to kind of clean up, the mess and kind of continue on Alabama. But they're not going to be anywhere near where they were.
Jesse, are you ready for rapid fire?
I think Brent's ready for rapid fire, so I'm ready for rapid fire.
All right. He's just hanging out, waiting for Cowboys-Niners talk. Fill in the blank. The word that describes your anticipation for Saturday's Notre Dame Navy game is blank.
I would say that the word that kind of describes my anticipation for the Notre Dame and Navy game is discipline. And I say discipline for multiple reasons because one, you have to be disciplined to play the triple option. And two, I think you have to be disciplined in terms of where Marcus Freeman and the team is in terms of, what their goals are for the end of the season, right? We saw what happened against NIU, but you have to stay disciplined and keep your focus on a really good Navy team that's going to run the triple option. So I think it has to be disciplined considering who you are playing and where you are in the season, and ultimately, what the end goal is, and that's making the playoffs.
It's interesting that yours is discipline because that discipline describes your anticipation. Mine is uneasy because the Navy game is always such an uneasy watch for me. It's like you're sitting there and Navy is just making these plays in 3 and 4 and 5 yards, and they start moving downfield, and it's like, they're once that offense, again, I know the offense is different this year, but it's like, you just always feel like, well, Notre Dame should be able to stop them, and sometimes they do. And other times, it's a little bit tougher. So I just always have an uneasy feeling going into this game because it's always a game that Notre Dame absolutely should win because of the difference in the talent on the field. But as we found out, they don't always win. So I'm not uneasy about the specific matchup. It's just because it's Notre Dame and Navy, and crazy things have happened in the last 17 years since they picked up that first win. So Jeremiah Love's only 100-yard rushing game this season was against Purdue. Jadarian Price is yet to have a 100-yard game, while Riley Leonard, of course, had back-to-back 100-yard games on the ground against both Purdue and Miami, Ohio. So, scale of 1 to 10, what's your confidence that either Price or Love will hit the century mark before Riley Leonard does it again this season?
I give my confidence a solid 8 out of 10, but the thing that still confuses me is I just want to understand what the thought process is in terms of snap counts between Love, Price, and Williams. It's so inconsistent game to game. And I would I'd like to understand, like, if it's so inconsistent like that, there has to be a reasoning behind that. You're not just going in there and randomly deciding, who's going to get carries when and where. So, that's the part that makes this question so difficult. Between Price Love, there's just an inconsistency of carries, but Riley Leonard's going to get his carries because he's the quarterback. He's going to be in every play. But, I think that there is going to be more of a focus on Riley Leonard kind of going down the stretch here because of what he can do and how he can change the game with his legs. But I think the steady Eddie pick here is Jeremiah Love because he's the guy that I think has the most talent. He has the most explosiveness. So I think he's going to be the guy to get the 100-yard game next.
Yeah. So you're calling it out. So you think that it actually is going to happen, that he will get it before Riley Leonard gets another one?
Yeah.
I just want to make sure. My confidence is only a 2 that it's going to happen because of what you were talking about. It's like Love had 38 snaps last week. The week before, it was like 26, and Jadarian Price had a lot more after he only played 5 snaps against Stanford because of the fumble. And it's just like the limited snaps that these guys have. And again, we're talking rushing here. We're not talking about total yards. Jadarian Price only had 10 carries against Georgia Tech. Jeremiah Love had 14 against Georgia Tech. And Riley Leonard carried the ball 10 times. It just feels like they're kind of riding this 3-headed monster, and the only way that one of these 2 running backs is going to have a big game like that is if they, pop off like a 60 or 70-yard run and then kind of tack onto it after that. Are you like in incognito mode? Have you gone into witness protection? All of a sudden, I can't even see you here. Oh, there you are. There you are. So that to me is the head scratcher. I don't understand it. What do you think, like in terms of this game in particular, Jess, like you were talking about tempo offense and that kind of thing earlier. Do you feel like this is a game where Notre Dame should even want to be using tempo, or do you want to just control the clock and keep the ball away from Navy as much as possible with that running game?
This is a hard question because I think that, part of you wants to say, yes, let's control the clock. Let's do our thing, right? But let's play devil's advocate with that situation. Say you take 7-8 minutes and you don't score somehow. Maybe you miss a field goal. Maybe there's an interception or a turnover of some sort.
Because Navy is good in the red zone with their defense.
So, and then now Navy goes on a drive where they hold 8-9 minutes and they score. Well, now that's over a quarter of football that's already gone, and you've already only touched the ball one time, right? So I think it's kind of not to be, in that kind of hold territory, but I think it's more or less kind of a mix of the both. I think you have to find a way to have efficient, but still kind of, maybe 5-6 minute type drives, because at the end of the day, you still have to give yourself time considering something might go wrong. You don't want to put all your eggs in one basket and potentially, fall behind. But I'm more so put the gas on the pedal, go tempo, and try to get ahead of Navy. And then if you fail and Navy's going to take a long time, well, at least you're getting the ball back with more clock because you yourself didn't take up a lot of clock.
DK says he would keep it away and give the defense breathers. I think that there is something to be said for that, but I also think there's something to be said for what you were just saying. And Joe says, do they receive the ball first? So basically, if you win the coin toss, do you receive if you're Notre Dame? I would put the offense on the field first and try to score. How about you?
Yep, I would. Against triple option, you got to take the lead and run with it. Especially
like when you consider going back to what we were talking about earlier with some of these holes that like the slow starts that Notre Dame has had. I would want my defense sitting on the sideline, my offense out there on the field, and put together, the best possible drive that you could right off the bat. I would absolutely want the ball first against Navy, just like against Army as well. Rank these teams in the order of how bad their current situation is. Auburn, Florida State, Michigan, Oklahoma, USC. You got 5 teams there.
So do you want to start with teams that have it the worst, or do you want to start with teams? Okay.
Go with the team that has it the worst first.
I think the team that has it the absolute worst right now is Auburn.
I completely agree with that. I
think they
think
took a chance on a head coach that was a little risky. I think when you play in the SEC, things get magnified because you're expected to play a certain type of ball. And you are still Auburn at the same time, a team that has a track record of being good at football. So I for that reason, I have to go with Auburn first.
I put them first as well because, like you said, you took a chance with a head coach who, quite frankly, is a snake oil salesman. And that's, like he might be good in the room and all that, but you hear some of the stuff that his former quarterbacks have said about him, like the finger pointing and stuff like that. I think that Hugh Freeze is a wolf in sheep's clothing. So I put Auburn at the top of the list. And, he's typically had success right away when he's gone to other coaching stops, and he has not had success so far at Auburn. So I put them. I completely agree with you. Number one on the top of your list. John has Florida State at the top of his. Do you have Florida State number 2 or one of the other teams?
I have Florida State number 2. I know that they, last season was a good season for them, but you can't have that sort of season, then flip around and do all the crying that they did about missing the playoff and then come back and have a 1 and, then they have 1 win right now, I think, maybe 2. The reason why I put them also up there is they don't play in the Big Ten or the SEC. They should have, They should be playing better in the ACC. I'm just like, it's a weaker conference overall. Yeah. I think it's harder to play in the SEC and Big Ten. So, again, coming off the season they had last year, there's no excuse to be, 1 and whatever in the ACC.
Yep. I've got Florida State number 2 as well, largely for the reasons that you're talking about. And like, you don't hear them, what have we not heard this season? You haven't heard any about Florida State trying to get out of the ACC and all this different kind of stuff, with just the way things have gone. And like you said, you cannot throw the kind of fit that you threw. I completely empathized with them to be undefeated and not make the playoff, but you can't do that and then look like you've looked. And for all the goodwill and all the things that it looked like Mike Norvell was building up to, this is just a major egg for them to have on their face. So who's your number 3 team?
Number 3 would be USC. Both of these teams are, well, I guess I don't want to give my next one because it just gives the rest of the order.
You can. That's fine. I mean, it doesn't have to be. But like, I've got USC, and then I've got Oklahoma, and then I've got Michigan. Do you have
that's
them in
the
that
same.
order?
Yeah, I got that. That's the same order for me. And the reason why, USC, Oklahoma are both teams coming from the Big 12 and the Pac-12 to the SEC. But I think USC has had more embarrassing losses. I mean, Oklahoma has lost to Tennessee, a top 10 team. They've lost to they lost to another really Texas. They lost to Texas. That's also a top 10 team. The only team I can't get on board with them losing to is South Carolina. But had they not lost to South Carolina, I don't think it's the end of the world for them. Again, they lost to Tennessee and Texas, 2 teams that are just ahead of them right now as a program. And that's fine. Like it's okay that, it's depending on who you ask. In my opinion, it's okay that you're behind Texas and Tennessee because of where they are in terms of their program. Like Texas wasn't good for a long time, and now they've got this thing built up, right? Tennessee, same thing. They haven't been good for a while, but now Heupel has, a good thing kind of going for them. So I just think they are just further along in their progression. And I think Michigan is Michigan. I think it'll take care of itself. I think that, obviously there was a ton of guys who got drafted. A lot of your coaching staff left to go to the NFL. So I give them the excuse of a lot of turnover. But I think that, Dave Portnoy is going to fire up that NIL fund. They'll find a quarterback and kind of get things back on track here soon.
Yeah, and I mean, like the thing with USC, I'll just kind of cover them since you covered Oklahoma a little bit more. Like this is just like for Marcus Freeman, Lincoln Riley is in year 3, and they should be better. Now they lost a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback who went number 1 overall in the draft, and they also lost Cliff Kingsbury. But like, he needs to be recruiting better than what he's recruiting right now, and just where they are, their entire program has to start recruiting to, you've got to be better on both sides of the, line of scrimmage, offensive line and defensive line. You can't lose to Maryland. Like there are games that you could see, like, okay, you're USC. You actually went out and, like you can't lose to Maryland, I guess, at the end of the day is what I'm saying, and like Michigan, the cupboard was left bare out there by Jim Harbaugh, and they don't have a quarterback right now, and it shows. But again, it's year one for the head coach, so I don't think that they're nearly as bad off as any of these other programs. Better Friday night viewing, USC Rutgers or game one of the World Series between the Yankees and the Dodgers?
Yeah, I mean, if we're being honest, I don't care about a crappy USC and Rutgers team. I'm going to be definitely tuned into game one of the World Series. It's the World Series. It's a 7-game event that only happens potentially 7-game event that happens one time a year. I can go watch a crappy football game any Saturday or Friday that I want.
I completely agree. And did you know that game starts at like 11 o'clock? Like they're going Big Ten after dark on a Friday night. Game one of the World Series all the way, baby. In it for sure. And like, I mean, it's Dodgers Yankees. It's been since I was a teenager that the last time they played in the World Series. By the way, I threw in a little Fernando mania the other day. Fernando Valenzuela passed away, I think the day after we talked about that. October has just been a horrible month in terms of, like Pete Rose passed away, Dikembe Mutombo passed away, and now Fernando Valenzuela passed away. Some of the greats of their sport. Why do you keep turning your light off? What are you doing over there?
You'll never know. You'll never know.
I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to get into the Cowboys here since Brent can't wait for it. Fill in the blank. The word that best describes your anticipation for Sunday night's Cowboys 49ers game is blank.
I'm going to take your word from the prior one, and I'm just going to emphasize it. Complete uneasiness. I've seen this story year after year, the last 4 or 5 seasons, and it always ends with the Cowboys getting embarrassed. And so the glass half full of me full side of me wants to be, well, the chances of them continuously just getting beat down year after year it has to flip to the Cowboys' favor and at some point, right? Like if you play 100 times, the Cowboys got to get them at least once.
You would think.
That's the glass half full of me, but I'm not expecting that. I'm uneasy. The 49ers just came off a bad loss, and so they're going to be pissed off and fired up. The only thing that gives me confidence is they have a ton of injuries lingering on offense between Trent Williams, between Christian McCaffrey, Jordan Mason is banged up, Deebo Samuel is banged up, Brandon Ayuk is now out for the year, Juwan Jennings is hurt in some capacity, so that bodes well, but then you got to realize the Cowboys.
It's just going to make you feel even worse on Monday, when they beat Dallas down the way they're going to.
I don't think they're going to beat them down, but I don't know how particularly. I don't give the Cowboys a chance of winning because the thing is too is their offense doesn't do a lot against the 49ers defense as well.
That's the thing, and that's Jeff Brown hit my word. It is dread, complete dread. It's of course a Sunday night game. Got to stay up and watch it. Like all those skill position players don't matter because the 49ers have just flat out physical Dallas every time they've played them in probably the last 5 or 6 meetings. So I don't see this being any different, and it's on the road. So I don't see it.
That should bode well in their favor. Cowboys are 3-0 on the road this season and 0-3 at home. So
maybe so. I don't know.
Come on, I need you to be more glass half full. Even if
I wish I could. I'm gonna give you some Cowboys 49ers trivia, and I actually saw this morning on Good Morning Football. The Cowboys beat the 49ers in week 2 of the 2011 season. thanks to a 77-yard touchdown reception by which of these receivers? Was it Miles Austin, Des Bryant, Jesse Holley, or Terrence Williams? Do you remember?
I believe it was Miles Austin.
Incorrect. Jesse Holley. It was Jesse Holley, the least obvious of the group. And they actually had Jason Witten as the option instead of Terrence Williams. I switched it to Terrence Williams because there was no way that Jason Witten was going to score a 77-yard touchdown. Tony Romo was the quarterback, but it was Jesse Holley who did it.
I'm thinking of the Chiefs game. That was Miles Austin.
Yeah, Miles Austin had the huge kind of breakout game against the Chiefs around that same time. Yep. Speaking of Good Morning Football, if you could only get your NFL takes and commentary from either Colin Cowherd or Kyle Brandt from Good Morning Football on the NFL Network, which would you choose?
Oh, it's an easy decision. It's Kyle Brandt. I only want to mute Kyle Brandt when he's talking about the Cowboys. I want to mute Colin Cowherd just about every time he's talking, right? I think Kyle Brandt is still very good at his job. He's very smart, very intelligent. I like the way that he, presents his content, right? Like I love, he knows how to make a segment, right? I've told you before, it's just, he loves to get on the same soap opera about the Cowboys every single year. Like, at least if you're going to talk crap, spice it up. But you give me
somewhat deserved though, right? I mean, you're right. Like he does just basically recycle the same argument against the Cowboys, but in his defense, the argument against the Cowboys remains the same every year. They can't win big games. They can't win playoff games. They don't show up. And now they're even worse this year than they've been the last couple of years. So I get it.
Yeah, but being in the playoffs is still, that's more than a lot of teams can say at the end of the day, right? You're still doing things right.
Now, I put this question in here specifically for you because I was curious what you would say because of the fact that you do get so riled up about Brandt's Dallas Cowboys takes.
Is there nothing good to say about the Cowboys?
Get ready.
It's always
Don't turn it on Monday. Don't turn it on Monday because you know what it's going to be.
See, this is why I get frustrated with you as a Cowboys fan. You don't have optimism that they're going to win, even if you think they're going to lose.
Why have they earned my optimism? You heard the garbage that Jerry Jones was saying last week, and then he went on the show with the same, Dallas radio show this week.
I listened to the whole interview.
Well, so you heard that, like, they didn't even ask him about Travis Henry. He launched into the Travis Henry stuff himself. It was like a straw man argument. He just started, arguing against the air, old man arguing against the air. Jerry Jones launches into the, his defense of why they didn't go get Travis Henry. They didn't even ask about Henry. And he's defending why he didn't get it. He's like, oh, well, we probably wouldn't have been, giving him the ball as much if he was here. It's like, really? Have you looked at your team and figured out that you don't have a running game and you need a running game? You're last in the NFL in running the football. But in terms of the Colin Cowherd Brandt stuff, again, like I was throwing it to you just to see what you would say because, every time Cal Brandt goes on one of his rants, I get texts from Jesse about, Cal Brandt is same old stuff all the time. And it's like, but like, if I want some self-important rant with some random metaphors and, half, baked truths, half-cocked takes and stuff like that, I'll go with Colin Cowherd. But if I want someone who can actually laugh at himself a little bit, mix in some music, some pop culture references and stuff like that, I'm going to go with Cal Brandt.
Yeah, that's right. That's kind of what I meant about presenting kind of, the way he presents his different kind of takes and stuff. But
Derrick Henry, sorry. I don't know why I was saying Travis Henry. Thank you, Joe.
But I think Colin Cowherd thinks he's like a philosopher half the time.
Oh, he does. He absolutely does. Joe says he honestly thinks Cowherd used to pay people to call into his radio show. I don't doubt that. That would not surprise me at all. Okay, what do I have left here? I've only got one left. There's a Russian AI company that is paying users $200,000 for the rights to use your face and voice on their robots in perpetuity, forever. Would you do it?
Yes, I would do it. And I don't care how much my voice is echoed across the Russian airways or Russian households or whatever it might be. But listen, I'll tell you what I could do with $200,000 in this very moment. I could pay for my wedding. I could pay off my student loans. I could pay off my new car and probably have a little bit left over to put a down payment on a house. So you give me all that for $200,000. All you got to do is use my voice for some robots. I'll never be there. I'll never hear them. I don't care. Give me the $200,000.
This seems pretty simple, like $200,000. And I save this for you. John says he wouldn't do it. He wants $1 million. I mean, like, what are these robots? What exactly is this going to look like? Am I going to care 10 years from now? Like what they're saying. I feel like, maybe I should hold out for a couple, 100,000 extra. I feel like I've developed my voice over a long period of time. Like maybe, and I actually speak some Russian, so like, I don't know, but I would do it at the end of the day. I would do it. $200,000, like that's a nice little start a nest egg kind of thing. I think it's easy. Pay, like you said, pay off your
You could
bills.
get your RV, you could get your hot tub
That's
that
right.
you want. There's a
That's
lot
right.
that you could do with $200,000.
Hit the road. Craig says, sounds like a way to steal your identity. Well, you're actually
They don't want my
selling your
identity. There's nothing good with it. You get debt with my identity.
Yeah. Corey says, then they can use your voice for anything they want. I mean,
yeah, but I'll never be in Russia to hear it. They're not just gonna make like a video of this robot with Jesse Sayers.
I mean, I
voice
feel
and
like it
post
only
on
matters.
YouTube.
Yeah, I feel like it only matters if you're someone famous, right? Like,
Yeah.
Joe says I can't sell out because I'm the voice of Notre Dame women's basketball. First exhibition game next Wednesday, by the way. The season is practically here. It's upon us. Exciting. All right. Well, let's go ahead and wrap things up tonight. A lot of good stuff, as always, on the good old We In, We Out show. We appreciate everyone's contributions there and in the chat as well. We've got IB Countdown to Kickoff, of course, that we will post tomorrow. So look forward to that. Brian and Trevor will have the mailbag show. So if you have your recruiting questions, be sure and jump in the mailbag show tomorrow. And, of course, the post-game show after the game. Noon kickoff. You excited about noon kickoff?
Yes. I am excited about noon kickoff.
Don't look too excited. Don't sound too excited.
Well, so this weekend I'm going down to Cincinnati to accompany Naomi to a bachelorette party.
Oh.
And the fellas are just going to be hanging out watching football. So
nice.
That's an exciting time. I think we're going to go golf in the morning and then watch football all afternoon. So I can't say
a good use of time.
Exactly. But I would like to finish this show off, since I don't get to write in my predictions and I will not be a part of the countdown show tomorrow. I would like to give my prediction of the Notre Dame score. I think the Irish come out on top 34-13 over the Navy midshipmen.
All right.
That's my final prediction.
All right. I had a hard time deciding how many points I think Navy's going to score in this game. 13 sounds about right. All right. Hit the like button before you leave. Again, we appreciate you, and we will talk to you next week on IB Nation Sports Talk.